It was a finals rematch in the Mile High City as Miami closed out their road trip in Denver. The Heat were sluggish early on, eventually losing by as many as 16 points, but eventually clawed their way back and dragged the defending NBA champs into the mud. But like the finals, the result was much the same, with Miami playing a tough, gritty game, keeping things close, but ultimately falling just short. We break down the game on today's late night episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're recording this late Thursday night, technically Friday morning. It's an hour into Friday already. We're recording this after the Heat lose a fun one in Denver, 103-97. A ton of stuff to get to here. We got a great show coming up. The Heat trailed the whole game. They came back from 16 down to get to within a possession in the final seconds with a chance to win this game, but they just couldn't come up with the win. The Heat go 3-1 on the trip. We will get to the big picture stuff here in a little bit, but David, what was your takeaway from this game?
I thought Miami really went pretty far in showing that they can compete at a high level. You know, I asked this in our episode yesterday with Tobin, how much of a must-win this was for Miami, at least to validate a lot of the recent hype regarding their win streak and the fact that they're quote-unquote back and everything else like that. And our concern, I think, across the board, all three of us felt like they could not go out there and lay a huge egg out there on national television and get blown out. And it looked early on like that might be the case. Again, down 16, getting torched by Michael Porter Jr., very, very sluggish, disconnected on offense. They couldn't find any way of scoring. Their defense was pouring, and it looked like it was going to go down that road. And then Miami, slowly but surely, clawed their way back, figured it out, got some better shooting, were able to attack the basket, were able to slow things down, playing to their tempo, and eventually kept pace. And as you said, had it within, a handful of buckets late in the game. Unfortunately, couldn't close that gap, but I think it did go so far as to show that Miami can compete with the very best team. Well, total caveat here, Denver playing on the second night of a back-to-back. They had just blown out the Kings the night before, so maybe they were a little tired, but it's also in Denver. They have a huge advantage there over other teams. Miami has not won there historically. It's been very difficult. Even in the Big Three era, they haven't won there. So this is not a place that's easy for them to win at, but they were able to be competitive, and I really think that they could have won the game, and I think they competed a lot more in tonight's loss, than they did even in the NBA Finals. I think they were really neck and neck with a very, very good team that's as good as they were last year in their run to the finals. So I think it was a really strong showing for Miami. I'm disappointed in the outcome, but at the same time, I'm also encouraged by it because I think Miami showed that they can be an elite team, and just as they have all season long, they've proven that they can beat almost anybody in the NBA.
This was closer to your point about the finals. This was closer than any loss that they had in the NBA Finals. The last one was Game 5. They made a late run in that one just to challenge Denver, but that game was never close. We were there. That game was never close. And so this one was close. You take the first quarter out of it where they were outscored 31-20. That's not right. They were outscored 36-20 in the first quarter. And it just felt like long road trip. You're in Denver. You mentioned already how hard it is just to play in Denver on a one-off, let alone at the end of a long trip, like Miami is. Undermanned, against a relatively healthy Nuggets team. They lost Jamal Murray midway through this game, and that had a big impact on this game, no doubt about it. But I would take the context that Denver was playing in. Even though they were on the second night of a back-to-back, it was a home back-to-back. They got the Heat at home, at the end of a long trip. The Heat with a lot of guys missing, where Denver was basically healthy for tip-off, right? And then obviously they lose Murray halfway through. So if you want to even call it a wash, we could agree, with Denver fans, to call it a wash. But again, I would still take their situation coming into this game over Miami's situation, even though they were on the second night of a back-to-back. That said, this was closer than any loss, all of that considered, closer than any loss that they had against in the finals. And I think a big reason for that, and I'm okay calling this a moral victory. I really am. We went into this game with certain expectations. Don't get blown out. Don't get blown out. Make this competitive. Act like you belong to be there, despite all the context around this and all the injuries that you're dealing with. No Tyler Hero, no Kevin Love. We'll get to that later and how big of an impact that was. But my biggest takeaway, David, from this one, I thought Bam Adebayo outplayed Nikola Jokic, and I feel really strongly about that. Where in the NBA Finals, Jokic outplayed Bam thoroughly. And I don't think there's any debate about that. I thought Bam did a good job against Jokic, with all things considered. Jokic was unstoppable in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
But he was outplayed by Jokic in every single game, basically, in the finals last year. Bam outplayed Jokic in this one. And it wasn't like the most dominant Bam game, and it wasn't the best Nikola Jokic game. But I thought Bam, and this was what was interesting to me, and this is how it relates back to Jamal Murray. Bam was able to just single cover Jokic the entire game. Their doubles on Jokic came late in the shot clock after he put the ball on the ground. It was disruptive doubles. It wasn't like early in the clock, hey, we're worried about this guy doubles, because they felt comfortable, Spo did, and Miami's defense did, that Bam can handle him one-on-one, and he did for the most part. Jokic in this game had 18 points on 6 of 15 shooting, 7 assists, 11 rebounds. Like, that's pedestrian for Nikola Jokic. And
that's a pretty good game for almost
Bam,
anybody else, but yeah.
Right. And then Bam on the flip side, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 8 for 18, made some of those mid-range shots after a slow first quarter. It was a slow first quarter for him. But then after him and the Heat found their footing, I thought Bam thoroughly outplayed Nikola Jokic, which, if these teams met again in June, I feel a lot better going into that matchup now with how Bam has gotten better even since the last NBA Finals. Because I think this game showed me Bam has gotten materially better, not just offensively, but I think even defensively with some of the strength gains and the conditioning gains that he's made. He was able to stand up to Jokic in a very meaningful and important way.
Yeah, even late in the game, switching on to Aaron Gordon and doing a really good job. Obviously, I mean, he switches on to almost anybody being able to guard 1 through 5, but he did do a really good job defensively. I don't know that I'm prepared necessarily to say he thoroughly outplayed him. I think you could give him an edge, certainly in the statistical output, but even just in the overall impact of the game. But I'll say it in 2 ways too. I think, one, he looked a little outclassed early on. Like, I thought that the game was going the same way that Bam looked early on. Like, he just was so intense. And I'm totally reading this and I'm playing, couch psychologist here, but I think that Bam was a little hesitant, a little gun shy out there, because he wanted to play Jokic so perfectly, because that's what it entails of him.
Right.
And anybody, Bam puts so much effort into his defensive presence, and you have to be playing Jokic so perfectly in order to be able to mitigate what it is that he does, because he's so impactful. And it's not just him, it's the ability to spray the ball out to 4 other guys and be able to, change the dynamic of the game within seconds. So Bam looked a little hesitant, and his offense was sluggish. He was just flatly bad offensively. Defensively, he looked a little lost as well, too. So that I kind of hold it against him. But based on the way that he played him in the last 30 minutes of the game, to your point, I think you could go into this on a micro and a macro view. Like, I would be encouraged by this if I were Bam Adebayo, because he did hold his own. And, maybe you could even say he outplayed him, especially in that last stretch of the game. So, it's not as glaring a difference between the two players. Like, we're talking about Jokic.
He wore Jokic
all-time
down.
Great.
He wore Jokic down. Jokic had that bad pass to, was it Michael Porter Jr. in the right corner, where it was just a bad pass.
And he never
and
makes
Jokic doesn't make bad passes.
Right.
And it was because Bam was in front of him, and Jokic looked worn down. He was asking for fouls even more than he usually does towards the end. Like, that was like, I am taking the macro view here, because obviously the Heat lost. Like, we know that. Okay, done. All right, the Heat lost. It was competitive. It was a fun game. It was a game I very much enjoyed. But Bam to Jokic is closer than it was in the finals last year, based on this game. And we have another game later this month, and I think and we'll learn more from that. But based on this game by itself, this one data point that we have, if that gap is closer than it was in the finals last year, that's a huge development. That's not nothing.
No, I mean, and again, and you mentioned earlier the loss of Tyler and Kevin. They would have provided something, and we'll certainly go into more detail later on. But I think, a lot of people even still give Miami they really challenged. They were tough on Denver in the finals and everything else. But Jokic was so clearly the best player in that series. Is so much better than Bam. But I think moving forward, you can kind of say, maybe that gap has closed significantly, and Bam is able to at least drag Jokic down. Who knows? Over this case of
then from
over
a
a
game
7-game
plan,
series, maybe Jokic would make the necessary adjustments.
sure.
But overall, I think that Bam did a fantastic job tonight, and I think he should be encouraged by it because we've seen Bam take a leap this season. It's been subtle but significant, and I think he's become one of the best centers in the NBA. He was already there, to be honest.
Yeah, and I got one more point on this, but we got to go to break,
Sure.
and then we're going to talk about the road trip in general and whether or not it was a success. We'll talk about all of that next, coming up on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. And you can bet all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Explore everything they have to offer. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Like the video on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment underneath. Tell us what you thought about the game and whether or not Bam Adebayo outplayed Nikola Jokic. Also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. While you're on YouTube, go visit our friends over on Locked On Nuggets. Leave a comment under their video, their post-game video. A friendly one. Just say, go Heat. See you in the finals. Let's do that. See you in the finals. Even though we're going to see them technically later this month. But also after March 22nd or whatever it is, in the finals.
March 13th.
Oh, even closer. All right, so before we get to the road trip in general and whether or not it was a success, my last point on this and why I think this Bam versus Jokic thing is a big deal. Miami's game plan until Jamal Murray got hurt, and I don't know that we got any word on whether or not we probably won't know tonight whether or not it's a serious injury, but that was scary when he goes down. You don't want to see that with the ankle, especially with Murray and his injury history. Yeah. But he was able to walk off the court by himself, and he seemed okay. It could have been worse, I thought.
Yeah,
so
the report during the game that he doesn't even normally play like the second night of back-to-back sets, so it was already kind of iffy whether or not he would even be out there against Miami tonight, and he was obviously there, but I guess just the idea of constantly putting pressure, especially on the back-to-back, was just too much, and he rolled his ankle.
Well, it was a freak act. Yeah, he stepped on Aaron Gordon's foot. Yeah. So, but anyway, the point being with Bam being able to guard Jokic one-on-one, Miami's game plan while Jamal Murray was in this game was, all right, Bam's going to just go single coverage on Jokic, and that's going to allow us to trap Jamal Murray going over those screens, and we're not going to have to worry about doubling Nikola Jokic because you can't double both of them, obviously. And so we remember how Jamal Murray torched the Heat in the finals last year, right? Like Jokic was just like that steady battering ram, and it was just Jamal Murray catching fire at the wrong times for Miami, which is basically why the Nuggets won the finals. But it allowed, because Bam was able to go one-on-one, it allowed Miami to double Murray. And Murray made a couple tough shots in this game, but I thought that the strategy was really sound. And so, going again, zooming out on this, and if these teams do meet again, we're gonna see this game again later this month. But if they do meet again in the finals, like, this is an important data point, and it's one we're gonna look at when we're doing our finals previews. If it is that Denver makes it out of the West and Miami makes it out of the East. So that was my last point on that.
Do you think Murray's injury is why we didn't see more DeLon Wright? I know you and I were texting during the game, and it seemed like Eric Spoelstra was leaning more heavily into offense, trying to generate as much scoring as possible. And obviously came down to that as the game waned down. But, no Haywood Highsmith, very little DeLon Wright. He was out there for just a brief time there.
3 minutes.
Would he have played more had Murray stayed healthy? Because then you have to have somebody that can guard him, and he's your best perimeter defender in terms of as a guard.
Maybe. I hadn't thought about that. You're probably right. Yeah, that was his job. And then once the guy goes
The
out,
job is
then
no
he
longer
doesn't,
necessary.
right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
doesn't have a job anymore, right? It's like
Right.
he wasn't fired, but his position was eliminated. You know what I mean?
Right.
So maybe that's why. But he basically go with, like, Jovic played 24 minutes in this one, which was a significant chunk, and then Miami basically going with 7 guys with Jaime and Caleb off the bench. Orlando Robinson playing a couple of stints
Oof,
in this one, but
not good.
not good. But basically, what you could expect for a young guy going up against the best player in the NBA. So
Yeah.
there's that. But the Heat go 3-1 on this trip. They get
Yep.
wins in New Orleans, Sacramento, and in Portland, and then a
Yep.
competitive loss in Denver. David, do you look at this trip as a success?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you can even go before the All-Star break and look at the
Mm.
2 wins against Milwaukee and Philadelphia to close out and carry that momentum into the All-Star break. And the fact that you get back Terry Rozier, that you're able to withstand the suspensions of Nikola Jovic and Jimmy Butler. I mean, the fact that Miami is where they are in the standings, and they had an opportunity to gain even more ground than the New York Knicks, but unfortunately fell short. I still think it's a positive. I think everybody in that locker room, as beat up and tired as they are after that really, very tough fought loss in Denver, I think that they still go to Miami very encouraged about the process, where they're at right now and compared to where they were a month ago in the midst of their 7-game losing streak. And a lot of that has changed. Like they have progressed so much over the month of February that I can't see how you can't take away positives from that. I know maybe the hype train is building a little bit too much momentum. It's a little bit too loud right now, at least from my taste. But I think you have to take a step back and look at where Miami is right now and admit that they are a much better team than they were earlier in the season, and that they're trending in the right direction at just the right time.
Why are you anti-hype train?
Uh, I like it better. Maybe I'm just a sicko, but maybe after the years, I really just like it when Miami is the dangerous loomer. I like it when they don't take Miami seriously and they just go in there and steal your lunch without you even expecting it. You're like, hey, what the hell happened? I didn't know. I didn't expect them to beat me up, and yet there you are in a puddle of your own blood. I think it's just I love that. I love that about Miami. Maybe it's just following this team for too long, but I kind of like. I don't ever want Miami going into a series with any kind of advantage or being favored in any way. I want them to be
You want
the
them to be the
underdogs the whole
underdogs.
way.
You want the bulletin board material, all this stuff. At
Yeah.
some point, people have got to catch up to the fact that they've been in the finals a bunch of times and they always make deep playoff runs,
Nope,
except for the
flukes.
1 year. Like,
Flukes the whole way.
I,
They under talented, a bunch of has-beens, 2-way contract guys, not undrafted losers. That's it. That's what they are.
you
They're
know,
not
it's
good.
uh, whatever. I agree with you. The trip is absolutely a success. I even consider losing this game a successful loss. Like,
Yeah, right.
I'm about moral victories. I'm sorry. And if people want to hit me up in the comments and be like, the Heat are not about moral victories,
This is one.
well,
This is one. Yep.
100% the Heat are about moral victories. 100%. Because if you don't really care about wins in the regular season, then you got to care about something. And then I guess so. You can't have it both ways. We don't care about winning, but also we're not about moral victories. It's one or
But
the
it's
other. It's about
yeah,
lessons. In other words,
it's
it's about
indicative. Yeah, exactly.
progress.
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
Miami
Yeah.
Heat are making progress, regardless of the W or the L. That said, just worth noting, standings watch, because that's the time of year that we're in. The
Mhm.
Heat were the fifth seed in the East when we started the games tonight. They've dropped now to 8th, but basically, Philadelphia is at 33
Tough.
and 25 as the 5th seed. Orlando, with their win against Utah, they're actually the 6th seed now. So Orlando would escape the play-in tournament if it all started today. And Indiana would be the 7th seed. Miami would be the 8th seed. But we're talking about literally a half game here. We're talking about just schedule
Yeah,
quirks
it's so
is
weird.
the difference here right now. So, and then Chicago and Atlanta are way behind, so we don't have to worry about them at 9 and 10. And Atlanta's actually in danger of falling out of this thing completely with the way that Toronto's been playing. But yeah, that's where we're at. I still feel really good about Miami getting out of the play-in tournament. If I had to put money on it right now, I would say they end up with the 5th or the 6th seed or something like that. By the time this all is finished,
You've
the
got
regular
you got
season.
2 really good opportunities coming up to add to that. You've got the Jazz on Saturday that
Yep.
they're in kind of up and down, but they're clearly a losing team at this point after the trade deadline. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got the Pistons, who've been much more competitive of late, so they're not quite the Pistons that you might expect. They're not going to be a pushover. So Miami has to win those 2 games before they go on a 2-game road trip against the Dallas Mavericks, who again are dealing with some inconsistency, but have been very good,
They've been good.
and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, if you have not been following, they're actually a really great
They're a
team, and they're
juggernaut. I don't know
and
if
they're
you're not aware
impossible
of
to
how
beat at
good
home.
they are, then you're literally not watching the rest of the NBA or even looking at stats. I don't
It's
know. Like,
possible they might not be, but yeah, they're the second
they did
best
lose
team in the
to
Western Conference. Yeah,
they did lose to the Spurs tonight. So,
yes,
but there's
yeah,
there's so much baggage in that Chet versus Wemby stuff. It's like not even like a real like game. I don't even really know.
yeah.
I'm gonna talk about that on Locked On NBA, so we don't have to talk about that here. All right. Reggie Miller had some interesting things to say about Terry Rozier on the broadcast. Is there a reason to be concerned with Rozier's shooting? We'll get to that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. They've got over 3 million members, and they're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Why? Because it's you against the numbers. You just pick more than or less than the stat projections on 2 to 6 players, and you watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And right now, if you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA, you get a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure you use that code LockedOnNBA to get that first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Are you an everydayer? I hope you are. We'll be back next week with a whole new slate of episodes. Are you a Wes head? Are you a David head? David, we didn't really disagree. We usually disagree on something. I feel like we haven't really disagreed on anything from this game. I think it's all copacetic, one big happy family, power of friendship right now.
It's that's what a win streak will do for you. If they were losing, I'm sure we'd be
find
in
something to
a very
disagree with.
different. Yeah, we'd be at opposing odds. But no, it's been all good lately, and I think Miami can be encouraged. Heat fans should be encouraged. Again, the way I feel is that it's a disappointing loss, but you can take really good lessons from it. Be encouraged by the overall play of Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. Like they shot under 30% from three, and they were missing two of their best. Well, one of their best scorers in Tyler Hero and a very productive bench player in Kevin Love, who would absolutely have been a benefit to have out there. Because defensively, he's not going to stop Jokic.
Let's talk about that because maybe this is what we're going to disagree on. We got some questions here that I want to get to. We will talk about Terry Rozier, but my first question is: did the Heat miss Tyler Hero or Kevin Love more?
Oh well, that's an interesting question there. I think I know which way you're going to lean. I think everybody who's been following the show for a while knows that you tend to agree that Tyler's impact
was the David heads. Let's go.
I mean, Tyler's impact was great, but I think they would have done a better job defensively trying to limit him. I don't know. I think I'm gonna shock you a little bit. As much as I've just made a case that Kevin Love's defense would have been fine out there against Jokic because he can drop against him.
Kevin Love would have been better than Orlando Robinson. Kevin Love, the strength that he's been playing with lately. I know we talk about his threes and the passing and the outlets and the veteran IQ, blah blah. But like he was just putting dudes under the basket in Portland and in Sacramento these last couple games. He is physically better than I've seen him.
Yep.
Definitely ever since he joined Miami, and probably better than he was those last couple of years in Cleveland.
Oh yeah. Like I don't know what his core workout is or what he's doing for his lower leg strength or whatever, but
Miami's been good.
He looks like he's been able to hold his own, and so I think he would have at least had a body on Jokic and kind of muscled him to a degree. Like Jokic is going to get to his spots. That's just the way he is. He's he doesn't look the part, but he's unbelievably strong and difficult to contain. He can just spin around even at his size and just get that jumper over anybody because he's so tall and so big.
He had that ridiculous through the double team, flicked it up with the right hand bang shot and just went in. And then he just started complaining about not getting a foul call. I was like, can you just appreciate what you just did? Because that was wild. Like
No. The foul complaining was after I mean, look, Miami's physical, so he's going to complain about being guarded that way. But you know what? To the overall point, I think they would have benefited from having Tyler out there. As much as maybe there's a duplicative, nature of his scoring set and what Terry Rozier is expected to play, and provide out there. I think having Tyler as a scoring threat would have spaced the floor differently, would have created more off-ball opportunities, more cutting. If we see Tyler the distributor, not just Tyler the scorer, I think we could have seen a little bit more secondary actions with guys cutting again and maybe a little bit more open space in the mid-range. more guys. Maybe KCP would have been on him, and maybe they would have allowed more open shots for Duncan or Jimmy or somebody else, because like they were doing a really good job of defending Jimmy because he had the ball in his hands and there wasn't really any other threat on the floor. Caleb Martin, Nikola Jokic, those guys really aren't legitimate offensive threats. With Tyler, you have to guard him, and I think he would have been a much more productive player, and it might have helped. And we'll never know, right? Because that's the whole question about the finals. Would they have even gotten to the finals had Tyler been there? Now is his opportunity to prove it.
I really hope he plays March 13th, man. I really hope he plays in that game.
Has to.
He should be back from this knee thing by then. But also, who knows with the Heat and how they treat these injuries and they're reporting on it. But
yeah, it's been mum. Like we haven't heard any details about him. Kevin Love was the last minute scratch.
At least he hasn't been out every time. Yeah, Kevin Love was the last minute scratch with the ankle thing. But at least he's been kind of questionable and downgraded to out before each of those games. So that would be reason for optimism. Is like we're trying to get him back, but not quite yet. Right. And now that they're coming back, you get home, you get the at-home training facility and all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping he'll be back by 13th, and hopefully there's not some other kind of injury that keeps him out of that game. Knock on wood. But the answer is Tyler Hero. Look, at the end of the day, having Kevin Love would have been nice, but Orlando Robinson only played 12 minutes. Like the answer to not having Kevin Love is just put Bam Adebayo back in the game, right? But for not having Tyler Hero, that really hurt them. For all the reasons you said, I thought his distribution would have been really important, but also his ability, and this is what we talked about in the finals last year, his ability to attack Denver's drop coverage, or even when Jokic comes up to the level of the screen, Tyler's ability to get around that and attack that little opening because he's got that quick trigger pull-up jumper. Like, that's the stuff that Miami did not have, particularly, and this brings us to our next question, when Terry Rozier was not playing well. Terry Rozier in this game was 6 of 15 overall, but only because he was making those 2-pointers. From long range, he did not have his legs under him. 1 of 8 on 3-pointers. The only one he made was that crazy, like he gets the steal off the inbound. It was a great play. But he gets the steal off the inbound, runs to the corner, and it's like the standstill, wide open, I have all the time in the world. So, like, his legs were barely even used. Like, you could have just shot that with your arms, right? So, he basically was.
I think Aaron Gordon was closing out, and he was kind of fading away. So it's even more surprising. He had to put a little extra mustard just to get the ball towards the rim. But either way,
he had 3 or 4 air balls outside of that. And Reggie Miller made this great point. He's like, "Hey, like this guy's coming back from a knee injury, and he's shortbreading all of these things, and that says that he just doesn't have his legs under him yet, and that knee isn't fully recovered." And Reggie Miller's not my favorite color analyst, but as a shooter, when he starts talking about shooting, I'm listening. Right, like now I'm paying attention because he knows more about shooting than anything than I'll ever know. Right, so and
about anything, like
about literally anything. Yeah, about literally anything. So look, I thought it was a really good point, and that brings us to our next question: are you concerned about Terry Rozier?
No, because I think he did have like some the ball handling, the mid range opportunities. Like he still looked electric. They still look like Miami's best rim attacking threat. So I am not overly concerned because I think there were those flashes there still. It's just a matter of it being able to integrate. Again, Denver playing a lot of minutes, still coming back from injury. His endurance is a little off too. Like he's just got to get back into it. I don't.
Yeah, it's a tough
I'm
spot.
not too concerned. Yeah, I think it was a bad game and those missed shots.
He still managed to make some like positive impacts. The steal with the 3-pointer in the corner.
Yes.
He had back-to-back threes late in the fourth quarter. Or I'm sorry, back-to-back 2-pointers that were tough twos late in the fourth quarter that got the Heat back into 97-93 with a minute to go. So put them back in that game. Bam hits a mid-range jumper right after that. So they're in and then Rozier air balls. And this was the last possession. Like Bam hits the mid-range jumper over Jokic. Draws the foul on Jokic. Jokic kind of extends the arm. Bam sells the call, and the Heat get the ball back. And the Heat have a chance to, I think, tie the game at that point. And
no, they were down
take
4.
The lead. Well,
they were down 4.
All right, so they're down 4, but a chance to.
It would have put them within 1
game.
with 30 seconds left. Yeah, it would have been a much better advantage for Miami.
And Rozier airballs a 3-pointer coming off of a screen.
Yeah, that hurt.
And that one was tough. And so, look. I'm with you. I'm not concerned about him, but it was just a weird game for him too because it was like, you're doing all these positive things here, and then you're just airballing threes left and right over there. It was very up and down for him. Suffice to say,
had they won, he would have gotten credit cookies, though, right? Like that's the whole, like the overall impact. That it was still, it felt positive to see him out there. Like he didn't give up. Yeah, He didn't give up. He was like still attacking the basket. He still had some nice tough
6 free
shots.
throws.
He was able to get to the line. That was my next point. So I think overall it was a solid game, but it just the misses, especially those air balls, just they look much more egregious when he
Right.
took those,
Those
and
are
it just
loud.
kind of left a sour taste. Yeah, exactly. Especially that last one too, because Miami's had cut it from like they were down 10 with like 2 minutes left, and all of a sudden they start closing the gap, and they're building this momentum and getting turnovers and foul calls their way. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this could get really spicy here. And then the missed 3-pointers kind of just let all the air out of the bag right there.
Overall, I think you and I agree on this. We're feeling good, even despite the loss. 3-1 on the trip. Miami right there. I know that they're 8th seed right now, but in the driver's seat in terms of getting out of the play-in tournament. They very much are.
Yeah.
And so this road trip has been huge for Miami overall. They're going to start getting guys back here. They have fully turned a corner. I really do believe that. And we got some good games coming up, and a few of them are going to be in Miami. We will have all of our post-game shows or reactions to those games that are coming up when we come back to the feed on Monday. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.